Summer, 1940. Southern England skies had turned into a slaughterhouse. Every dawn, British radar stations lit up with the same warning: enemy formations crossing the English Channel. And every dawn, RAF Hurricane squadrons were scrambled to intercept. What should have been routine air defense was rapidly becoming a nightmare. German Ju-87 dive bombers, the dreaded Stukas, were tearing through British shipping lanes, radar sites, and airfields. And the RAF's standard tactics were failing badly. On paper, the Stuka was a joke. Slow, clumsy, fixed landing gear, a top speed barely touching 240 miles per hour. RAF pilots joked that a Morris Minor could outrun it. The Hawker Hurricane, by contrast, could reach 340 miles per hour. It should have been an easy kill. It wasn't. By mid-July, after-action reports painted a disturbing picture. Pilots were doing everything by the book, attacking from behind, closing to lethal range, unloading full bursts of .303 machine gun fire. And the Stukas just kept flying. Flight Lieutenant David Crook of No. 609 Squadron described his first encounter off Portland. Asterisk, came in exactly as trained. 8 Brownings firing. Hits all over the fuselage. The aircraft simply refused to go down. Asterisk, others reported the same. Hundreds of rounds poured into a single target. Tracers sparked across metal skin. Pieces broke off. Yet the bomber completed its dive, released its bomb, and limped back toward France. The numbers were brutal. Each Hurricane carried roughly 1,400 rounds. A 2-second burst fired about 160 rounds, plenty to destroy older aircraft. Against a Stuka, it meant nothing. Pilots burned through ammunition, risked mid-air collisions at close range, and watched their targets escape. Worse still, the Stukas never flew alone. Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters orbited overhead, waiting. The moment an RAF pilot committed to an attack run, the escorts pounced. Ignore the Stukas and Britain bled. Attack them, and you risked being shot down. Go after the escorts first, and the bombers got through untouched. Air Vice Marshal Keith Park of 11 Group faced an impossible equation. Fighter Command was losing aircraft, and more importantly, trained pilots, faster than they could be replaced. Every failed interception brought invasion one step closer. Then the truth became clear. The Stuka's survivability wasn't luck. It was engineering. Junkers had designed the Ju-87 to survive the most dangerous moment of dive bombing, the pullout. Steel armor plates formed a protective bathtub around the pilot and rear gunner. Vital systems were shielded. Fuel tanks self-sealed when punctured. From behind and above, the aircraft was nearly bulletproof. RAF doctrine, drilled into every pilot, was now working against them. The classic stern attack meant firing directly into the Stuka's strongest armor. .303 rounds shattered against steel. The rear gunner returned fire. Pilots broke away empty-handed, if they survived. Frontal attacks were worse. Closing speeds exceeded 500 miles per hour, leaving barely a second to fire. Several pilots died attempting it. Beam attacks required perfect positioning in chaotic air battles, a luxury rarely available. But the Stuka had one fatal weakness: its belly. The underside carried little protection. Hydraulic lines, control cables, and vulnerable fuel sections lay exposed. No German engineer expected a fighter to attack from below, because no sane pilot would try it. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Squadron after squadron expended thousands of rounds for almost no results. Losses mounted. Morale cracked. The math no longer worked. Something had to change. Someone would have to abandon every rule in the training manual and attack where no one was supposed to survive. And that realization would mark the beginning of a tactic so dangerous, so unconventional, that it would redefine how the RAF fought, and how the Stuka would finally be beaten. The answer came not in a briefing room, but inside a burning cockpit. Casualty reports at Fighter Command headquarters made grim reading. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding was losing Hurricanes, pilots, and precious time to a bomber that simply refused to die. Stukas were not supposed to be this hard to kill. Yet they were bleeding the RAF dry. By mid-August, intelligence officers began crunching the numbers. The results were alarming. Nearly 2,000 rounds of .303 ammunition were required for a single confirmed Stuka kill, and that was assuming the pilot survived the escort fighters long enough to fire. A Hurricane carried only 1,400 rounds. The math didn't work. Britain was fighting a defensive war with tactics built for another era. Everything changed on August 16, 1940, over Southampton Water. Flight Lieutenant James Brindley Nicholson of No. 249 Squadron was already moments from death. Cannon shells from a Bf-110 had ripped through his Hurricane, setting the cockpit ablaze and igniting the gravity fuel tank. He was wounded, on fire, and should have bailed out immediately. Instead, through smoke and flames, he saw something else. A Ju-87 Stuka was pulling out of its dive directly beneath him, completely unaware he was there. Nicholson's Hurricane was too damaged to chase from behind. A dive from above would overshoot. But there was one option left, an option every instructor had warned against. He rolled inverted. Negative GS threatened to starve the Merlin engine. Orientation vanished. Ground became sky. Sky became ground. Every survival instinct screamed at him to stop. Nicholson didn't. He held the aircraft upside down and fired upward into the Stuka's belly. The effect was immediate. Thin aluminum skin tore open. Hydraulic lines ruptured. Fuel tanks ignited. Control cables snapped. The rear gunner never saw the attack coming. His weapon pointed uselessly into empty air. 3 seconds. That was all it took. The Stuka's wing folded. Smoke poured from the engine. The bomber rolled onto its back and spiraled into the channel. Moments later, Nicholson bailed out at barely 2,000 feet, badly burned but alive. He would receive the Victoria Cross, the only fighter command pilot to earn it during the entire war. The official citation praised his bravery. What it barely mentioned was the method. Engaged enemy aircraft from inverted position. That single line quietly marked a revolution. The Hurricane was never meant to fly inverted. The Merlin engine relied on gravity-fed fuel. Upside down, it should have quit within seconds. But Nicholson's fight revealed a crucial truth. Under high power, the engine could tolerate 5 to 8 seconds of inverted flight. Just enough time to kill a Stuka. Pilots began experimenting. Keep the throttle high, roll inverted, fire, roll back upright. Pull power at the wrong moment and the engine died instantly. Get it right, and the impossible suddenly worked. It felt illegal. And it worked. By the 18th of August, later known as the hardest day, Hurricane squadrons were trying it in combat. Not all succeeded. Some lost control. Others nearly stalled into the sea. But when it worked, the results were devastating. Stukas began falling apart mid-climb. Crews reported aircraft disintegrating without warning. Rear gunners never saw attackers. Survivors spoke of invisible fighters beneath them. The statistics told the story. Between the 16th and the 21st of August, inverted attacks produced dramatically higher kill rates with a fraction of the ammunition previously required. Air Vice Marshal Keith Park noticed the change immediately. This wasn't luck. It was evolution. The tactic was dangerous. Pilots were exposed, disoriented, vulnerable to escorts. It demanded skill, nerve, and perfect timing. But Fighter Command had no better option. On August 23, Tactical Memorandum No. 14 quietly acknowledged reality. Buried in careful language was permission to attack dive bombers from below, during climb-out, the closest thing to official approval the inverted attack would ever receive. What began as one man's desperate improvisation was becoming doctrine. And as Stuka losses mounted, the Luftwaffe would soon learn a brutal lesson of its own. The most dangerous place in the sky was no longer behind the bomber. But there was a dangerous truth Fighter Command couldn't ignore. Teach the inverted attack the wrong way, and it could kill pilots faster than the Luftwaffe ever could. Several squadron commanders took matters into their own hands. Informal training sessions began, led by pilots with strong aerobatic backgrounds. At Duxford, squadron leader Douglas Bader personally drilled Hurricane pilots in inverted discipline. His rule was absolute: never stay upside down longer than 5 seconds, and always know your altitude before rolling. Operational training units were slower to adapt. At number 6 OTU, Sutton Bridge, squadron leader Philip Goodall initially refused to teach inverted gunnery. Most of his students barely had 30 hours on Hurricanes. Asking them to manage reversed controls, gun sights, throttle discipline, and spatial disorientation seemed reckless. Then he lost 3 graduates in 1 week, all on their first operational sorties against Stukas. Goodall changed course. He introduced a progressive syllabus. First, pilots practiced brief inverted holds at altitude. Then inverted flight on a fixed heading. Only after mastering both did they attempt inverted firing runs against towed targets. The final test combined everything: intercept, roll inverted, fire, roll upright, all within 5 seconds and minimal altitude loss. Not everyone made it. Nearly 30% of pilots simply couldn't overcome the disorientation. Their inner ears refused to cooperate. They weren't failures. The human brain just isn't built for upside-down combat. These pilots were reassigned to escort and fighter sweep roles where their skills still mattered. Those who succeeded saw immediate results. On September 7th, pilot officer Geoffrey Page, fresh from Goodall's course, scored his first Stuka kill over Kent using an inverted pass. 3 seconds of fire. Fuel ignition. Crash confirmed. Less than 500 rounds expended. The efficiency was undeniable. Some units refined the method further. Polish number 303 Squadron developed a team tactic. One pilot attacked inverted while his wingman stayed above, guarding against escorts. The coordination demanded trust and discipline, but they executed it flawlessly. Not every unit needed the technique. Spitfire squadrons, faster and more agile, often achieved success with conventional attacks. The inverted pass remained primarily a Hurricane solution, born of necessity. And it didn't stay in Britain. When Hurricane squadrons deployed to North Africa and Malta, they carried the technique with them. The Stuka proved just as resilient over desert skies as it had over the Channel, until inverted attacks reappeared. At Tobruk in April 1941, pilots who'd fought in the Battle of Britain demonstrated the method to new arrivals. Within days, Stukas were falling apart during climb-out. The desert actually helped. Clear visibility, flat terrain, fewer escorts, and stable visual references made inverted attacks easier to execute. Malta-based squadrons refined the tactic even further. Pilots developed the drop and flip, a climbing roll that left them inverted directly beneath the Stuka at the perfect moment. Against convoy attacks, Hurricanes waited below circling dive bombers, tracking them through the dive and striking during pullout. The results were brutal. By mid-1941, inverted gunnery was formally taught throughout Mediterranean OTUs. What began as desperation had become doctrine. The consequences extended far beyond Hurricanes and Stukas. Aircraft designers took note. Post-war bombers would no longer rely on rear-focused armor. Protection had to assume threats from every direction, including below. The Soviet IL-2, heavily armored underneath, was a direct response to lessons learned from Stuka losses. The technique itself didn't survive the jet age. Early jet engines couldn't tolerate negative G at all. But the principle endured. Find the vulnerability your opponent didn't plan for. Attack from the angle they can't defend. That idea still defines modern air combat, from Korea to today's fighter doctrine. Combat isn't two-dimensional. Victory belongs to whoever controls the vertical. James Brindley Nicholson never lived to see the full impact of his decision. He survived the war but died in a transport crash in 1945, months after victory in Europe. His Victoria Cross honored his courage, not the innovation that reshaped aerial warfare. History often works that way. One pilot, one burning aircraft, one moment of unorthodox thinking. And suddenly, an armored enemy was no longer invincible. That was the real legacy of the inverted attack, not flying upside down, but the willingness to question everything, even which way was up.